national progress. Across Africa today, young people are navigating economic uncertainty and deep social inequalities. Yet, they are also extraordinarily talented, globally connected, and full of ideas. What many need is structured support, mentorship, and a values-based leadership framework. The Obafemi Awolowo Future Leaders Fellowship is designed to bridge that gap and to connect transformational leadership ideals with the realities of governance and public life. Our vision is simple but powerful: to build a pan-African network of future leaders shaped by our ideals. Through the fellowship, participants will engage deeply with leadership philosophy, sharpen their personal effectiveness, receive one-on-one mentorship, and collaborate on projects that address real societal challenges. The program itself aims to nurture a vibrant alumni community that continues to grow in influence and impact. Admission to the program will be competitive and merit-based. We will be inviting applications from young persons aged 20 to 35 across Nigeria and beyond. Our expectation is that each cohort will emerge with deeper ethical clarity, stronger execution capacity, and accelerated impact in their respective fields. We also hope that the fellowship will make our ideals freshly relevant to a new generation of change makers. In this regard, we invite all who believe that service to the people must remain the core of leadership to partner with us. Investing in leadership formation is one of the most meaningful ways to preserve and extend the legacy of values that define our leadership. Together, we can move from celebrating history to shaping the future. Further details, including the proposed start date and application process, will be shared soon. Today, however, we gather first and foremost to listen, to learn, and to be challenged. The memorial lecture invites us to think deeply about the quality of leadership our societies require at this critical moment in history, and about the standards to which we must hold ourselves. Your Excellencies, Royal Fathers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, before I take my seat, I must thank the SSG of Ogun State for his humility. You will see where he's sitting. I begged him, I implored him to give up his seat, and he did. Well, I've known him for a long, long time, when he was my neighbor in Ebukweju, so I suppose it wasn't too difficult. I thank you all once again for being part of this important occasion, and I wish us all a most stimulating and rewarding engagement. I thank you all for your attention.
Yeah. kọ́mọ wa kò lè dé wa nítorí ẹ̀. Ọmọ láṣọ ayé ọmọ láṣọ. 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 Bóyá ogún ẹrú bóyá wọ̀fà ọmọ. Bó bá lógún ẹrú sẹ́ bóyá wọ̀fà ọmọ. Ìjọ tábàkù o ọmọ ládélé. Bàbá lókè jẹ́ kọ́mọ wa wò lédè wa nítorí ọmọ láṣọ ayé ọmọ láṣọ. 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 Ọmọ láṣọ ayé ọmọ láṣọ.
All right, thank you very much. Please give Ambassador Awolowo a big round of applause. It's not big enough. Thank you. Let me remind you that while the lecture, while her welcome address was going on, a few dignitaries entered into the hall. I have said this before and I'll say it again. Gentlemen, my colleagues in the media, on our too plenty for here. Let's dissipate ourselves. If you have taken a shot, please relocate. I will not give you visa for wherever you are relocating to, but please, ladies and gentlemen, even though Ambassador Awolowo has recognized him, the governor of my state, you kuku don't know the one that is my state. They called him GSM when he was, well, they still call him GSM in my state. Please welcome GSM, Governor Seyi Makinde, Governor of Oyo State. We've also seen present here the Orogun of Okeila in Oyo State. Please welcome Alayeluwa Oba Adedokun Abolarin. I know there's another royal father here. I will recognize him shortly. But let me also, a former head of service of the Federal of Nigeria is here with us, Professor Oladapo Afolabi. The next item on the program will come up shortly. You've heard Ambassador Awolowo copiously refer to the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation, the Obafemi Awolowo Leadership Prize, and a number of other things. The question you are asking, of course, is, what is the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation about? Is it just another one? A number of things we need to know. I should let you know, by the way, that the representative of Olubadan is here. I will give us his name shortly. In the meantime, let's have a video presentation to tell us all about the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation. Let's go.
That lie ahead, those of us who have the good fortune to lead our people will need statesmanship of the high order and God's guidance will manage the affairs of our country for the benefit of every Nigerian citizen.
One important development after the transition of Chief Obafemi Awolowo was the establishment in 1992 of the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation, the custodian of our intellectual legacy. The foundation was set up as an independent, non-partisan, non-profit research institute dedicated to immortalizing the ideals of Chief Awolowo and is committed to the promotion of a socially edifying interaction between policy and scholarship. It has over the years established its credentials as a credible advocate on many issues including education, health, the economy, and poverty alleviation. The foundation has actualized its mission mandate through various outreach programs. These include lectures, dialogues, executive leadership, seminars, symposia, and more recently, our conversations. All of these are designed to provide suitable fora for rational discussion of great issues of the day in order to continue to build the idea that inspired the public and patriotic activities of Chief Awolowo. In pursuance of its axiom of generating ideas for national development, the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation has ensured that its annual lecture series hold without fail, even in the face of the great challenges like COVID-19. The maiden dialogue was with the theme, Nigeria, the Way Forward. The foundation also organized other groundbreaking lectures, dialogues, and conversations on critical issues like the dialogue on education, themed Nigeria and education, the challenges ahead, Nigeria in search of leadership, Nigeria, democracy and the rule of law, and more recently, Obafemi Awolowo lecture themed With Nigeria. Subsequently, on March 6, 2022, the foundation held its 30th anniversary symposium to which participants were invited from across the globe. In January 2009, the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation launched a year-long program in celebration of the centenary of the birth of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, with the public presentation of the foundation's commemorative publication, Awo on the Trail of the Titan. 2 centenary lectures were delivered, the first by Professor Wale Soyinka and the second a few weeks later by a former Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Kofi Annan. A special centenary dialogue was held in collaboration with the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, with the theme, The Awolowo Legacy and the Youth. It was held at the university's Oduduwa Hall and was very well attended by staff and students of tertiary institutions from across the country, despite an ongoing nationwide ASU strike. Indeed, ASU at the national level gave its total support in writing to the program. As part of the celebration, the foundation held a program on 50 years of television in Africa, the journey so far, at the Premier Hotel in Ibadan. On October 6, 2009, the foundation co-hosted a launch of a book authored by Insa Nolte titled Obafemi Awolowo and the Making of Remo, the local politics of a Nigerian nationalist, in collaboration with the International African Institute and Edinburgh University Press at the School of Oriental and African Studies, London. From January 21, 2010, the grand finale conference themed Free Education in Nigeria, 55 years on, was held alongside the public presentation of Awo the Builder, the children's version of Awo's biography, written by Chief Wumi Adigbamire at Neka House, Alausa, Lagos. The foundation has continued to enjoy tremendous support from all strata of the Nigerian society. A significant aspect of the foundation's mandate is poverty alleviation. Very early in its existence, it embarked on a microcredit project mobilizing critical stakeholders to confront the issue of poverty and proffer solutions. In furtherance of this objective, the foundation prepared a valuable document which it distributed at a microcredit summit held in Washington, D.C. in the United States in February 1997. And since then, it has continued to build on that pioneer effort. Of particular interest is the annual Obafemi Awolowo Memorial and HID Awolowo Memorial Football Tournament for under-17 boys and girls, designed specifically for the right development of youth at the grassroots. There is also the Foundation Center for Leadership Studies, which hosted its inaugural event titled Leadership for Corporate Philanthropy. The Obafemi Awolowo Prize for Leadership was instituted by the foundation in the name of Chief Obafemi Awolowo to encourage, recognize, reward, and celebrate excellence in Nigerian leadership. In selecting candidates, emphasis is laid on characteristics of leadership and good governance that are in tandem with Chief Awolowo's values. The candidates must be honest persons, possess strong moral principles, and must also be persons in whom people believe and repose trust. The prize is awarded every 2 years based on demonstrable evidence of substantial achievements across the board of the criteria laid out by the selection committee. Because of the stringent conditions attached to winning the award, only 4 distinguished personalities have been able to win the prize. They are Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka in 2012, another Nobel laureate and former South African President Thabo Mbeki in 2014, and Chief Afe Babalola, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, in 2018. The 2024 edition was won by Dr. Akewumi Adeshina. The Awolowo Foundation's varied public outings are in reports which are widely circulated and can be sourced from the Foundation's website at www.obafemiawolowofoundation.com. For the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation, it has been decades of impactful engagement with humanity. The foundation looks ahead with confidence to deepen its traditional activities and also break new grounds to the glory of God and the development of humanity. Obafemi Awolowo Foundation, generating ideas for national development.
If you planned to clap, don't stop your plan and make it generous. Thank you very much, Obafemi Awolowo Foundation, for everything you do. Let me recognize just 2 dignitaries who have joined us, or 3. I told us earlier that we have a representative of the Olubadan of Ibadan. Please welcome Arialasa Olubadan, along with Chief Mrs. Bola Doherty, MFR, High Chief Ademola Odunade. A round of applause for him, please. Also here is a former governor of Oyo State and former Minister of Interior, Ogbeni Rauf Aregbesola, represented by his son Kabir Aregbesola. Please give him a round of applause. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to please welcome the chairman of this event, Chief Emeka Anyaoku, for his opening remarks.
Well, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I be permitted to stand on the existing protocol very ably enumerated by the Executive Secretary of the Awolowo Foundation, Ambassador Dr. Tokunbo Awolowo. But I must salute the representative of our president Ahmed Bola Tinubu, and the Governor of Oyo State, Engineer Sheyi Makinde, who are here. I join the host for this meeting, Ambassador Dr. Tokunbo Awolowo, in welcoming you all to this lecture in honor and in remembrance of the sage, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, GCFR, on this day, the 117th anniversary of his birth, and in this town of his birth, Ikene, which has as a result become emblazoned on the map of Nigeria. It is right to recall that Chief Obafemi Awolowo was one of the three founding fathers of modern Nigeria, and that his exemplary legacies in service as the Premier of the Western region, for outstanding individuals who in their career have demonstrated the attributes of the sage. These attributes were mentioned by Ambassador Tokunbo Awolowo, but if I may reiterate them.
Recording in progress.
The attributes include personal discipline, cerebral leadership, integrity, competence, pro-people policies, and genuine patriotism. As you have been told, I have the honor and privilege of chairing the selection committee, which, with the assistance of a technical committee consisting mainly of university professors, selects the winners of the Obafemi Awolowo Leadership Award. I am glad that our lecturer of today is the distinguished academic and prolific author, Professor Wale Adebanwi. You will, of course, hear more about him in the citation. But suffice it for me to say at this point that after his education in the universities of Lagos, Ibadan, and Cambridge, Professor Adebanwi became the first black Rhodes Professor at St. Anthony's College, Oxford University. And he is presently a Presidential Penn Compact Professor of African Studies at the University of Pennsylvania. And here, mentioning Pennsylvania, if I may digress a little bit, with a personal anecdote about my personal experience at the University of Pennsylvania. 60 years ago, And when I say 60 years ago, I assume I must be the oldest person in this hall, because I am now 93. But 60 years ago, on 15th January 1966, I was invited to the University of Pennsylvania to address the Association for International Affairs, along with my counterpart at the British Permanent Mission to the United Nations in New York. I was myself at the time serving as First Secretary Counselor in the Nigerian Permanent Mission to the United Nations under the late Chief Simeon Adebo as our ambassador. The format of the meeting was that after our speeches on the unilateral Declaration of Independence, which happened on 11 November 1965, by Ian Smith, the leader of the racist minority regime in the then Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, the members of the audience were to put questions to the two speakers. The very first question was put to me by a man who wanted me to tell him more about the military coup d'etat in Nigeria. I thanked him for his interest in my country, but suggested to him that he might be mistaken Nigeria for Algeria, where President Bembela had been overthrown, or for the Republic of Niger, where the then President Hamani Diori was having some problems. But the man persisted by saying that on his way to the meeting, he had on his car radio that a military coup had occurred in Nigeria, and that the Prime Minister, Sir he of course couldn't say the name of the Prime Minister, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, was missing. Whereupon I requested a 10-minute break in order to go to the nearest telephone booth to call my ambassador in New York. Those were the days well before the use of mobile phones. I returned to the hall to tell the audience that it was true that something unusual had happened in my country, but that I could not tell the details. This was where and how I learned about the first military coup d'etat in Nigeria. But I must now go back to our lecture. I would, in this respect, like to make a very brief comment on only two of the major current challenges facing our country, namely the preoccupation with the 2027 national elections and the unrelenting insecurity in the country, with the continuing kidnappings, abductions, and killings in states like Zamfara, Kwara, Niger, Plateau, Benue, and Sokoto. On the 2027 national elections, I want to say to the government, and in particular to INEC, especially after the controversy over the electronic transmission of votes from polling stations, polling units, to INEC results viewing portals, that the international community will be watching very closely the party campaigns, the processes, and the actual conduct of the elections, and that the results of the elections will be assessed for their fairness and credibility by other countries, including in particular those countries that have diplomatic representation in Nigeria. Regarding the raging insecurity in several states of the country, I want to say that after over a decade of inability to arrest the kidnappings, the abductions, the killings, and the growing populations of people forcefully displaced from their ancestral lands and farms, that the federal government is right, indeed right, to seek collaboration and help from friendly countries in addressing the country's internal insecurity. The only caveat should continue to be that in seeking to effectuate the elimination of the bandits and the jihadists, the collaborative arrangements should continue to be mindful of respect for the sovereignty of Nigeria. I believe I must now end what should be brief chairman's remarks, so as to make way for the main business of today, namely the lecture by our honored guest lecturer, Professor Wale Adebanwi. I thank you.
Please give our chairman a big round of applause. Well, you have heard from the chairman that the next item on the agenda is the lecture. Therefore, if I should try to put any other item, even a recognition, before the lecture, I will face EFCC. And since I do not want to face EFCC or ICPC or any PC, please welcome our guest lecturer, who is a Guggenheim Fellow, Presidential Penn Compact Professor of Africana Studies with a secondary appointment in the Department of Political Science, University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, USA. He is Director of the Center for Africana Studies at UPenn and a senior advocate, a senior associate at the African Studies Center, Oxford University, the UK, where he was the first black person to hold a Rhodes Chair in Race Relations at St. Anthony's College, Oxford. He is the president of the Association for Africanist Anthropology, a section of the American Anthropological Association. He is the author and co-editor of numerous books, including Yoruba Elites and Ethnic Politics in Nigeria, Obafemi Awolowo and Corporate Agency in 2014. He is author of Democracy and Nigeria's Fourth Republic in 2023, and How to Become a Big Man in Africa. Yeah, I know you are interested in that one. Subalternity, Elites and Ethnic Politics in Contemporary Nigeria in 2024. Please welcome Professor Wale Adebanwi.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, ably represented here by the Honorable Minister, serving and former governors, including the Governor of Oyo State, Governor Seyi Makinde. I'm not from Ibadan, but I'm an Ibadan person. Ibadan is the best city in the whole world. So I'm so glad to see you, my governor. Distinguished guests, Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I will not be brief. We are gathered here not only to remember a man who, through his thoughts and actions, offered us a new mode of dignity, but also to reflect again on what his legacy offers us in the context of Nigeria's interminable search for good leadership. As the polity stumbles from one era to another tragedy in the so-called nation-building efforts, it is remarkable that we must return to contend with the ideas and the practical demonstrations of leadership of the man with whom Nigeria has been having an unending conversation, Chief Obafemi Awolowo. As kidnappings and killings have become the rituals of daily life in many parts of the polity, with the nation state itself facing the threat of being kidnapped, it is important to remind ourselves of the theological, economic, social, and political provocations and disasters that defined this era, to remind ourselves that these provocations and disasters that defined this era are mere manifestations of Nigeria's refusal to reconcile itself to the fundamentals of how to build a good society, as well as an egalitarian federal democracy, which Chief Awolowo, more than any other political thinker in our country's history, articulated and for a few years demonstrated with long-lasting impact. At the core of the crisis that has engulfed the polity for several decades now is a leadership crisis. This is the reason I would like to reflect today on leadership and what I call Awolowo theory of action in the context of his devotion to politics as future making. As we experience what would seem to be the normalization of an internal security landscape in which there is a convergence of jihadist insurgency, communal grievances, some under the name of banditry, secessionist agitations, and criminal economies, those who are not familiar with Awolowo's insight and foresight would need to be reminded that the man with the round frame glasses had warned the ascendant political order of his age that if there was no course correction, what we are experiencing now would constitute their generation's endowment to the political geography that Frederick Lugard imposed in the heart of Africa. As I reflected on this lecture, it struck me that most of what Awolowo has been celebrated as well as criticized for concerns the past, though the man was, during his lifetime, mostly concerned with the future. The past was only a useful background for him in redetermining the future. Thus, it's an irony that while this deeply divided country continues to be bogged down by the politics of the past and the conflicting and contrasting narratives of who wronged whom in the past and how we arrived here, what it truly needs is a reflection on the postulations of a man who almost always emerges from our past to constantly remind us about the possibilities of our collective future. For Hao, history-making was in the service of future-making. Some have said that Awolowo came too early for Nigeria. I disagree. He was a man whose most important life mission could be said to have been one of future-making. Leaders who are future-makers never come too early. This is partly why Chief Awolowo remains relevant today. When we talk about Awolowo's theory of action and his leadership qualities, which remain unrivaled almost 4 decades after his passing, we are gesturing at the fact that ultimately he was a man concerned fundamentally with Nigeria's future, Africa's future, and indeed the future of the black people of the world. As he stated in Path to Nigerian Greatness, he made a vow while in Calabar prison in 1965, and I quote him, "I hereby dedicate the rest of my life to the service of the peoples of Nigeria, nay, of Africa, by promoting their welfare and happiness. This is my vow and my pledge, made to God. At this juncture in my life, my one and only ambition is to have an opportunity to live the rest of my life for history by means of selfless and beneficent service to the peoples of Nigeria in particular, and of Africa and the black peoples of the world in general," unquote. It is clear from this pledge that living his life for history was about making a future for his people, that is, Nigerians, Africans, and the black people of the world. This conclusion about Awolowo's approach to history-making as future-making, I suggest, is particularly critical in an era in which Afro-pessimists seem to have moved from regarding Africans as a people without history to a people without a future. An overview of the continent's current conditions leads to distressing conclusions, with Nigeria standing out, given that it possesses not only the largest population, but also the most vibrant and highly skilled labor force, even though a substantial percentage of these has migrated abroad. From the resurgence of military adventurers in West and Central Africa, the return of presidents for life, if they ever went away, in Central and East Africa, symbolized by the nongenarian in Cameroon, or the octogenarians in Equatorial Guinea, Congo, Brazzaville, Uganda, and Eritrea, and their younger version in Rwanda, to the relentless sufferings imposed on the people of the continent by interconnected crises arising from governance failures, corruption, poverty, poor infrastructure, unemployment, most worryingly, the highest rate of youth unemployment. Roughly 1/3 of Africa's 420 million youths are out of work or have stopped looking for work. And the violent conflicts, all worsened by climate change and high dependency on primary resources, the extraordinary capacities of the people of this continent and their insuperable cheerfulness have been challenged in different ways. Yet, the continent remains salvageable, if not immediately, certainly in the near future. So too is Nigeria, according to Chief Awolowo. Awolowo always believed in the possibility of a glorious future, no matter the odds. This is based primarily on his modernist outlook, which underpinned his progressive politics. Thus, to reflect on the future-making that was central to Awolowo's public project as a pathway to his theory of action does not constitute a simple political ethical response to the tragedy that Nigeria has experienced, or what even in much better times was described as a squandering of riches. Rather, it is to provide us with a programmatic idea, an ideal of what is to be done when a polity and its people confront such a tragedy. Moral outrage, while important, is not sufficient. Awolowo showed this clearly throughout his political career. What is important is always to imagine a better future, no matter how bad things are. He was constantly asking, what are the possibilities of a better future? This is why I have decided to focus today on politics as future-making, using Chief Awolowo's ideas and his public career as a heuristic lens to examine Nigeria's unending search for effective leadership. This idea of politics as future-making could represent a paradox, given that classically, politics is the art of the possible. But Awolowo continues to speak from the grave because he decided, while on this side of the divide, never to surrender the future possibilities of politics based on long-term thinking, planning, and development to the personalized political exigencies of the search for power. The question of temporality was always evident in Awolowo's reflections. From thinking about what to do with the legacies of the past, both its assets and liabilities, to what kind of society and politics could be constructed in the present in order to create a better future. Future-making was a focal point of his life's mission. I think, therefore, that it is important that we use this to reflect on his legacy and re-evaluate the leadership challenges facing Nigeria. Awolowo looked back only to look forward. He acted in the present of his time only to ensure a greater future for his people. Thus, for him, the future constitutes, to use the language of some philosophers, an awakening of the present. In this sense, the past, present, and future are less about being, that is, who or what we are, but about becoming, that is, our future possibilities. This was why he was a man of incredible hope for the possibilities of a new dawn. We recall again his 1963 allocutus, partly a lamentation about what had become and could become the lot of what he described as this great federation. Awolowo stated, and I quote, "For some time to come, the present twilight of democracy, individual freedom, and the rule of law will change, or might change, into utter darkness. But after darkness, and this is a commonplace, comes a glorious dawn," unquote. It's important to note here that, contrary to what might seem evident in Nigeria's political history, Awolowo believed that in the ultimate triumph of good over evil, and he thought that that was only commonplace. Against the backdrop of this hope for Nigeria, which some frustrated adherents from his region of Nigeria have now rejected and even reinterpreted, perhaps it is useful, in remembering him, to address our minds to a few pertinent questions about Nigeria. Why has Nigeria constantly produced some good leaders in every area of human endeavor, but has not experienced overall sustainable good leadership? What is it in the total composition and structure of Nigeria that makes it difficult, if not impossible, for sustainable good leadership to emerge? While has the country's evident good human agency in areas such as medicine, law, civil advocacy, the arts, including literature, music, etc., been incapable of weakening, if not neutralizing, the strong and recalcitrant agency of bad national political leadership? Mr. Chairman, I will be modest by suggesting that I have some answers, but I do. I intend to wrap these answers around the questions raised by Awolowo's ideas and practice. I therefore invite reflections on these questions in this forum, as we commemorate a man who devoted his entire political career not only to addressing these questions, but also to demonstrating the limitless possibilities of good leadership. Let me quickly explain what I mean by future making. It is a proactive, thought-based, and practice-oriented process of conceiving, shaping, enacting, and propelling desired future states rather than merely predicting and imagining them. This process of conceiving a collective future and enacting the conditions that will produce such a future involves, 1, founding, or what others call active creation, and 2, defining the goals and purposes of that collective future, and 3, designing the strategies and tactics necessary for achieving the goals and purposes of that collective future, and lastly, mobilizing the people through various means, including electoral politics, to march towards that future. Awolowo's vision of the future was captured by the slogan of his fourth political party, the Action Group: freedom for all, life more abundant. This was the impetus for the Yoruba sloganization, so to put it, of that universal ideal as Afenifere. In the 1950s, this was a revolutionary idea that made Awolowo an enemy to local and foreign forces that would later combine to ensure that he never became Nigeria's leader. In Awolowo's egalitarian vision, equality of good fortune through shareable social projects for all citizens without presupposing equality of outcomes is within the capacity of the modern state. But those who could not contemplate such a world asked from him, freedom for all and life more abundant for everyone? Where would that place those of us who are enjoying age-long privileges based on religious and cultural authority? The children of the poor peasants and the children of the high chiefs and high clerical authorities would be provided with a level playing field in which they can all thrive? What a dangerous idea. Such worries, expressed or acted out in various ways by Awolowo's adversaries, sparked a clash of visions of Nigeria and the temporary political and electoral defeat of Awolowo's vision, despite its notional and even ideological triumph. Indeed, one could argue that while the worst of political leaders no longer challenge Awolowo's egalitarian vision in principle, even while working hard to ensure that it will never become dominant or triumphant at the national level, Nigeria continues to face the challenges of good leadership precisely because of the failure of the dominant political elite to embrace this vision. Yet, paradoxically, it is evident that Awolowo's vision of an egalitarian society has fueled all the struggles to build a better society and polity in the post-Awo years, from the protests against structural adjustment, the June 12 struggle, through the Bring Back Our Girls campaign to the NSAS protests. I return to the central question: why has Nigeria, despite having produced such great and good leaders in politics, some of whom are present here today, in different areas of socioeconomic life and at different levels, failed to produce sustainable good leadership? About 4 decades of sustained engagement with Awolowo's thoughts through his writings and speeches, combined with my study of Nigerian history and politics and society, have led me to distill 4 cardinal reasons why it has been difficult for the polity to produce sustainable good leadership and transform this suffocating Lugadian enterprise into one in which there is freedom for all and life more abundant. The first is the nature and dynamics of state composition. In his career and published works, Awolowo devoted considerable effort to analyzing and understanding how we arrived at the pre-independence era. This included the legacies of Nigeria's various ethno-cultural groups, particularly his own region. This analysis included the liabilities and assets of the past. This formed the backdrop for his critical political analysis of the colonial experience. Then this formed the basis of his examination of the nature and dynamics of the inherited post-colonial state. The fundamental challenge of such post-colonial state as Nigeria, especially given the nature of its ethno-regional composition, the inequalities and inequities built into the system not only by the British but also by differential exposures of different peoples and regions to the Enlightenment project, and their different degrees of readiness to surrender parts of their ethno-cultural heritage that were incompatible with the march of human progress. All of this considered the basis for Awolowo's reflection. Indeed, this was why he called Nigeria a geographical expression, even as he recognized the potential for good leadership to transform the nature and dynamics of that composition. Thus, Awolowo theorized and later articulated what needed to be done, not only to end colonial rule, but also to institute a new form of governance grounded in the best legacies of the Enlightenment. He also linked these to the best cultural legacies surviving from the histories of Nigeria's different regions to build a workable federal democracy and a welfare state. For him, at this point in the 1950s and 60s, the ideological and political basis of these were the triplet instrumentalities of constitutionalism, federalism, and democratic socialism. The second challenge to building good leadership is the nature of the political economy. Though Awolowo devoted a considerable amount of time and his life's work to understanding, analyzing, and then articulating the nature of Nigeria's political economy, at the point in the 1950s and up to the late 1960s, when he published some of his most important works on the subject, agriculture was the backbone of Nigeria's economy. It also dictated the nature of regional and federal revenue, and to that point, the structure of Nigeria's fiscal federalism. But as crude oil displaced agriculture, both fiscally and culturally, Awolowo foresaw the dangers that the emerging ethos of national cake would pose to the future of the polity. But those in power and the core of the political elite did not heed the warning. As petrodollars flowed into the national covers, not only did the military in power tilt the structure of federal revenue towards dispossessing the constituent parts and the poor masses, but the emergent fiscal federalism became that only in name. Despite their flaws, the moderation and relative fiscal sense of proportion of the leaders of the First Republic gave way as the oil-based political economy transformed not only the leaders, but also the broader elite formations, the middle class, and even some segments of the working class into a profligate socioeconomic and political formation. When in the early 1970s, a Nigerian leader reportedly said Nigeria's problem was not money, but how to spend it, the elite led the people into an era of spend first and think later. Investment in the future, both in a fiscal and social sense, was not considered, and in less than a decade, the oil boom turned into a gloom. However, before that happened, a prodigal political economy had affected not only the social and cultural environments, but also our politics. Deliberate and process-oriented leadership was no longer desirable. The army of anything goes, as one mournful departing chief of army staff captured the reality in the late 1980s, turned Nigeria into a country of anything goes, with a damaged political economy, which, even when the economic index improved, could not change the culture of looting. Thus, the dominant political economy is incapable of encouraging, promoting, supporting, or even tolerating good leadership. The implications of this for governance and for party and electoral politics have been devastating. Indeed, while much of the blame must go to the political class and the elite, the people as electorate cannot be absorbed of their share of the blame. It is difficult for a pay me to vote for you political culture to produce sustainable good leadership. The third reason for the absence of good leadership is the nature of social composition. The emergent social formation is a product of our collective refusal to transform the nature and dynamics of state composition and the political economy that have produced the current social dynamics. Because of the two factors I elaborated earlier, we have developed a beggarly culture which has not only deepened in the last few decades, particularly since the era of settlement as a directive principle of state policy, but it has also been federalized and canonized. We have worked hard towards the near total destruction of the ethical basis of public culture. We have taken the worst aspects of our socioeconomic notions and practices, which have been exacerbated by the cultural illogic of our world, and expanded and extended them while ignoring the best and the most positive aspects of existing ethnocultural formations and practices, such as the Yoruba notion and practices of Omoluabi, gentleman of the well-bred, the Hausa notion and practices of Mutume Kaki, that is the good man, and the Igbo notion of Ezigbo Madu, a person of good character. This points to the virtues such as high moral standards, integrity, temperance, and good conduct that are critical for a citizenry that would build and sustain a good polity, and from which good leadership could emerge. Because of the fundamental importance of leadership being considered by men and women of temperance, Awolowo consistently emphasized the need for personal discipline and for physical and mental mastery. When we look around in the last few decades of our national politics, even though the country is not lacking in men and women of temperance, the Omoluabi, the Mutumu Kaki, and the Ezigbo Madu, how many of such people have the nature of state composition and the political economy allowed to rise to the highest levels of power? Yet, only a federation in which a critical mass of Omoluabi, Mutumu Kaki, and Ezigbo Madu associates and organize for power, either directly or indirectly, can good leadership emerge and be sustained. The final reason is directly related to the previous two, the nature of elite composition. Let me use the end of military rule and the process that led to the Fourth Republic as an example of the grotesque nature of elite composition in Nigeria, particularly of the dominant political elite, which some describe as an oligarchy. This oligarchy may have an ethno-regional core, but we will be deceiving ourselves if we fail to recognize that every part of Nigeria has contributed to and continues to contribute to its membership. As General Sani Abacha's murderous and plundering misrule collapsed and the rump of the military worked their way out of power, this tiny but very powerful and strategically and tactically potent elite, combining both their civilian and retiring military wings, came together to ensure that the long battle for federal democracy and egalitarian rule, which predated but was restarted almost as soon as the military seized power in December 1983, was hijacked and trivialized. As democratic and progressive forces were between 1998 and 1999 struggling to create political parties and political alliances across Nigeria to produce good leadership, as they had tried to do unsuccessfully before in the First and Second Republics, and as they tried to do again with near success in the Third Republic, the dominant faction of this ruling elite, to use street language, pulled a fast one on the progressive forces and the masses of Nigeria. They quickly recruited one of their own to stop Nigeria's march towards democratic progress in its track and halt our movement to reimagine egalitarian rule and push Nigeria towards what Awolowo called its birthright and its destiny, that is, Africa's leading light. Since that successful transition to civil rule, but abortive transition to good leadership and egalitarian rule in 1999, the nation has been groping for the rediscovery of the vision and mission that informed the long pro-democracy struggle. Despite the formidable odds against effective leadership in Nigeria, we must acknowledge that the factors I have identified are not immutable. This is one of the most critical lessons Awolowo taught us, and it is integral to his theory of action. Good leadership is most critical when public issues remain unresolved and are even unsettling. In fact, Awolowo remains a shining example precisely because of his capacity to lead the polity and society in overcoming grave odds. What then can be done about these odds? Again, as the late thinker and political reformer showed, the most critical factor of political transformation is political agency. However, in the context of what has transpired since Awolowo's transition, the leveraging of political agency to ensure good leadership is only possible through the re-engineering of elite formation and composition. This is because human agency is at the heart of the process for correcting the challenges posed by the other three factors that I elaborated earlier, that is the nature of state composition, the nature of the political economy, and the nature of social composition. To move against the odds and produce the socio-economic and political conditions that will ensure sustainable good leadership in Nigeria, I will conclude by reflecting on Awolowo's theory of action and the lessons we can learn from his political life. Chief Awolowo already showed us the path. We need to adopt and adapt his methods, tactics, and strategies for the present, and reverse engineer how he delivered effective leadership and governance in the Western region. So how can Awolowo's theory of action help us to confront and resolve this leadership challenge in the context of politics as future making? As widely acknowledged, in his project of socio-economic and political transformation of a typical plural post-colonial state such as Nigeria, Awolowo moved from diagnosis to postulation, and on that basis, from planning to elaboration, and then to action and implementation. Thus, from his writings, reflections, and active leadership, we can design a theory of action for future making. In my research on Awolowo's life and leadership that I hope will lead to a book at some point in the future, I have designed his theory of action in 5 of his books. In these 5 books, we can clearly see his project of moving from diagnosis and prognosis to elaboration, a program of action, and then implementation. This includes the PATH series, Path to Nigeria Freedom, Path to Nigerian Constitution, Path to Nigerian Greatness, and the trilogy on the structural and agential condition of transforming Nigeria into a great country. That is, Thoughts on the Nigerian Constitution, 1966, the People's Republic, 1968, and Strategy and Tactics of the People's Republic of Nigeria, 1970. In each of these books, the work of future making is clear. Whether that future is of freedom for all, the greatness of the country, a constitutional republic, or that of a people-centered republic, as well as the strategy and tactics of building such a state and society. Path to Nigerian Freedom is a seminal political manifesto that Awolowo published at age 38, in which he advocated how Nigeria could move from a geographical expression, as he famously described the Lugadian contraption, to not just a united nation state, but a great one and a beacon of hope for the black people of the world and humanity in general. In this book, while some of his contemporaries were either still floundering in the alley of ideological obfuscation or too ill-equipped to envision a future beyond the trappings of tradition, Awolowo outlined the need for rapid self-government and advocated federalism as the only viable system for a united Nigeria. Such was the strength and clarity of his argument that even his strongest opponents eventually embraced this political architecture. Despite all the violations that the federal system has experienced, particularly under military rule, and the uses and abuses of the federal system to serve narrow ends, it's a testament to the strength of Awolowo's vision that almost 80 years after he first defended this system and elaborated its specific value and process of enactment for Nigeria, no one in the country today, even the most ardent hegemonies, reject federalism as a desirable system for keeping Nigeria together. The challenge remains how to make Nigeria truly federal, and the battle is ongoing. It is clear to the politically discerning there can be no sustainable leadership in Nigeria if there is no true federalism. In Path to Nigerian Greatness, Awolowo reflects on the political and socio-economic foundations necessary for Nigeria to achieve national, continental, and even global greatness. Drawing on his experiences as a thinker and doer, and based on what had happened in the more than 3 decades since he outlined the path to Nigeria's freedom, and against the backdrop of Nigeria's return to civil rule in 1979, he lays out the principles of ethical governance, federalism, economic planning, and social justice. In the book, described as both a political manifesto and an intellectual contribution, Awolowo explores Nigeria's challenges and opportunities and offers a comprehensive framework for national development and democratic stability. However, despite the fascinating and, in the case of this book, inaugurating insights in the two books and on how to build a country that would not only stand the test of time, but would also be the envy of the continent, it was in this trilogy, Thoughts on Nigerian Constitution, the People's Republic, and the Strategy and Tactics of People's Republic of Nigeria, that Awolowo most ably demonstrated his future-making thinking and vision. In his project of ensuring freedom for all and life more abundant, Awolowo presented his intellectual and political legacy to the nation in each of these three books. As a leader, convinced that the structural basis of any federation was critical to the potential success of such a union, Awolowo returned to the subject of federalism in Thoughts on Nigerian Constitution, arguing that true federalism is the only viable system for Nigeria, while denouncing the creeping unitarism in the wake of the collapse of the First Republic and the advent of military rule, will later fatally damage the Nigerian federalism. And just before the Civil War, Awolowo insists in this book that recognizing Nigeria's inherent diversity is critical to national unity, economic development, and effective governance. As for the People's Republic, Mr. Chairman, permit me to quote elaborately from Awolowo's preface to the book. Perhaps this will be a direct reminder of the kind of mind that was at work on the question of our national salvation and the possibility of Nigeria's greatness. States Awo, and I quote him elaborately now. This book is in three parts. The first part deals with British rule in Nigeria, while the third sets out a blueprint for a stable administration in an independent Nigeria. Part 1 is an indispensable background to part 3, the one depicting the base degree from which the ascent in the other is to be scaled. Part 2 is an exposition of political, economic, and social principles that are of universal application and validity. It is interposed between parts 1 and 3 in order that the raison d'etre and the rationale for a clean break with the British administrative heritage detailed in part 1 and the imperative need for the acceptance of the blueprint in part 3 may be clearly understood and appraised, unquote. He continues, and I quote him again. Part 2 does more than this. It demonstrates the applicability of the methodology of any kind of social problem and insists by undisguised implications that all social problems can and should be solved by employing the tools of scientific investigation. Before Bacon put his imprimatur on the methods of induction, mankind had depended for everything he did on trial and error and the rule of thumb. But since his time, the tools of observation, empiricism, analysis, classification, synthesis, and generalization have been thoroughly forged and perfected and can be confidently used in the investigation of any phenomenon or in the search for a solution to any problem. In other words, mankind has now reached a stage in its development when it will be inexcusable ignorance, big-headed stupidity, and unpardonable dishonesty on the part of anyone, society, or community to adopt an unscientific approach to any of its problems, unquote. I will pause for a moment to emphasize the critical point that Awolowo makes here. Any leadership that fails to adopt a scientific method to social problems is engaging in, I quote him again, inexcusable ignorance, pig-headed stupidity, and unpardonable dishonesty, unquote. To conclude the long quotation, after noting the limits of early philosophers who engaged political theories that were, quote, mere analysis, classifications, and definitions of past and existing political institutions, unquote, without deducing, and I quote him again, laws and principles of universal application and validity, which can be invoked with confidence in dealing with new situations or with the evolution or establishment of new institution. Awolowo concludes, and I quote him a little elaborately again. For my part, I regard the whole world as man's laboratory. Since Herodotus and other historians, and since Aristotle and other men of logic and science, innumerable facts and data required by man in unraveling any social problem with a high degree of precision have been accumulated in this laboratory. And the methods of accumulating more facts and data are no longer in doubt. Besides, for about 40 centuries now, man has been performing various experiments in this laboratory. One of them is the experiment in the science of government, or of managing a state in such a manner as to guarantee prosperity and happiness for the people. It is my considered view that enough experiments in this sphere has been performed to enable a clear and valid enunciation of principles of universal application to be made, unquote. For the future maker, politics involved deploying not just the art of government, but more critically, the science of government, or of managing a state for the sole purpose of guaranteeing prosperity and happiness for the people. That was Awolowo's vision of Nigeria, a genuine People's Republic. The last of the trilogy is Strategy and Tactics of the People's Republic of Nigeria, which he regarded as a follow-up to the first two. In this book, there are two main points which Awolowo made in the preface that are worth emphasizing. The first is that he starts the book by returning to his core argument in the People's Republic, noting that keeping any state together without specified aims and objectives, and I quote him, will undoubtedly generate discontent, instability, and public disorder, the kinds that Nigeria is witnessing now and has been experiencing for a couple of decades. Yet, he argues that it is not sufficient to have national aims and objectives. They must be of such quality and character, and I quote him again, that will invoke an abiding sense of patriotism and loyalty from the citizens, and must be such as will, in their execution, benefit all citizens substantially and without exception, unquote. The second point is that, given that he was writing the book as the country was engaging in a civil war, though the aims of the war was to keep Nigeria one, Awolowo argues that, quote, this, that is the aim of keeping Nigeria one, by itself is an abstract concept which could not sustain us in the present struggle for so long, unquote. The ultimate aim, he said, was, and I quote him, because we all realize that a united Nigeria has a lot to offer for the promotion of the welfare and happiness of its citizens than a dismembered country. To keep Nigeria one is, therefore, not an end in itself, it's a means to great national ends, goals and targets which are ascertainable and attainable, unquote. He concluded, and I quote him again, that it is these ends that I have, with as much diligence as I can muster, sought to discover, define, explain, and justify in these and other previous two books, unquote. This book, grouped into three parts, objectives, priorities, and institutional organizations, examines the economic, social, political, and constitutional objectives which Nigeria must pursue, the order in which these objectives must be pursued, and the institutional organizations which are essential for the execution and attainment of the stated objectives. Mr. Chairman, I urge those who are yet to read these books to do so, and those who have read them to return to them. You cannot but come away with one conclusion and perhaps a question. What a mind we had in Awolowo. And how could a country that produced such a mind and which has access to such a programmatic path for national redemption and greatness continue to suffer the violent paralysis that Nigeria has experienced, particularly in the post-Awo years? It is not for nothing that the Unity Party of Nigeria in the Second Republic had a light as its symbol, and that light was placed at the heart of the map of Nigeria. As the leader of a political elite that was invested in the domestication as well as the elaboration of the Enlightenment in Nigeria, Awolowo could not have been anything but an optimist. Those who still wonder or are indeed stupefied by his commitment to Nigeria's potential glory should read these books or read them again. How could anyone who laid the path to national greatness and demonstrated it twice when he had the opportunity be anything other than an optimist about Nigeria's future? If the country continues to fail to match its potential, why do some go back in time to accuse Awolowo of undue investment in the possibilities of Nigeria, as if Awolowo as a political leader and as a thinker of possibility and actualities did not do his part to ensure that the country rose to its potential? If Nigeria has failed to fulfill her potential, is it not already evident that the problem lies not in the potential itself, but in what succeeding rulers have made of these constraining and enabling capacities they inherited, as Awolowo clearly articulated them? Let me conclude by outlining the key processes of future making again, based on a theory of action as evident in Awolowo's political life and writings, that the political leadership of this age needs to reflect on and adopt if it is committed to building a better society. The first is a deep, hard-edged, and critical analysis of the historical conditions under which a socio-political agenda must proceed, with a focus on future possibilities. The second, in this analysis, attention must be paid to the structural and agential conditions of the context. For instance, what are the enabling and disenabling realities of the existing institutions and institutional processes, such as the state, the political system, or the political architecture, party system, the constitution, etc., etc. Here, the issue of a new democratic constitution and true federalism must be considered. And what are the realities and existing forms of human agency, such as the level of education of the population, the state of health and access to medical facilities, the parameters and quality of infrastructure, and the quality of the political, economic, industrial, cultural, and other elites, etc., which will affect or determine the nature of the transformation that is possible and necessary. This will serve as the basis for convening like-minded individuals to build a political movement and a political party that can lead the necessary process of establishing an egalitarian polity and a greater nation state. For Awolowo, this was possible mostly through a progressive political party. Third, a reflection on and then an evaluation of the most appropriate and effective philosophical and ideological lens through which to understand and change and or strengthen existing realities by means of structure and agency. This will be followed by the elaboration of a concrete and achievable agenda of state building and social reformation that is as alive to the strictures of existing society and polity as it is imbued with a bold vision of human possibilities that can power the making of a greater future. A critical part of this agenda will be to shift the fundamental basis and logic of our political economy from a distributive one based on hydrocarbon resources to a productive one sustained by redistributive justice. The instruments of such redistributive justice include, as attested to by experts, progressive taxation, cash transfers, investment in human capital, regulation, and inclusive growth strategies. The primary goal of such redistributive justice would be the creation of an egalitarian polity and society. The last is the scientific part, as championed by Awolowo. That is, the gathering of facts and data, including comparative experiences in other societies and states that are necessary to create new structures and structural possibilities, as well as to create new forms of and deepen and expand human agency and other capacities, thus establishing the building blocks of a better future. On this basis, the structural changes and institutional processes that must be put in place or strengthened must be accompanied by new and expansive forms of human agency. For instance, at the heart of this is education, which Awolowo regarded as the most effective instrument for transforming human agency and society, and its closely related institutions and processes of human sustenance, that is healthcare. For instance, if Awolowo were alive today, he would have gathered experts around him to consider the implications of artificial intelligence for Nigeria and for Africa. Before I move to the last stage of my lecture, let me quickly provide a further example of Awolowo's investment in scientific social planning and specifically the role of education in such planning. Barely 3 months after the start of the Nigerian Civil War, specifically on October 19, 1967, as the Federal Commissioner of Finance and the Deputy Chairman of the Federal Executive Council, Chief Awolowo made a national broadcast to outline a blueprint for post-war reconstruction. The war had just started. He was already building post-war reconstruction. Among the economic, infrastructural, and social plans that he announced, and you can read this, it's actually published if you are interested, that he announced were a special annual fund to be created at the end of the war for the specific purpose of, and I'm quoting him, stepping up the training of high-level manpower in the Nigerian universities at the undergraduate and postgraduate levels, raising secondary school and trained teacher population in the states which are lagging behind, and preserving wastes at the secondary school level for the more advanced states, and providing free primary education for the children of all the members of the armed forces, unquote. So the last stage is the careful implementation of the agreed agenda at 2 levels. First, at the level of the political party that will seek to gain power and implement this vision, The other is at the national collective level, in which the masses of Nigerians are mobilized around an egalitarian vision and imbued with a sense of ownership that will ensure that they fully participate in this task while supporting a leadership that has a firm and unyielding focus on building a much better future for the greatest number. Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, Chief Awolowo always started from first principles, as I hope I have demonstrated in this lecture. In his future-making project, he began with what is the nature of the problem, and then moved to what is to be done. He recognized what was inherited in Nigeria of his age, from the pre-colonial through the colonial to the post-colonial eras, and the implications of all of this for the nature of state formation in Nigeria. But he refused to be paralyzed by the challenges of that inheritance. Rather, he asked and acted on what needed to be done to create a much better future in the face of objective reality, to bend the arc of history towards justice, freedom, and egalitarianism. Also, as a scientific thinker, Awolowo never believed, as he argues in the long passage I quoted earlier, that Africans were exempt from natural laws, or that as a people we constitute an exception to any of the rules that were brought to bear by the Enlightenment, even if the Enlightenment was first consummated in Europe. In the 1940s, for instance, he totally rejected the idea that Africans or African polities were not ripe for freedom and democracy. As the Oxford historian of empire, Margaret Pyam, acknowledged in her 1961 Rich Lectures in London, which was published later in a book titled The Colonial Reckoning, and I quote her, "Indeed, Chief Awolowo has declared that any Western tendency to excuse deviations from democracy in Africa is only another insulting colonialist assumption that Africans are too primitive and barbaric to conduct what he calls this beneficent and enabling form of government," unquote. Palms acknowledged, perhaps grudgingly, that Awolowo as Premier of Western Region was, and I quote her, a practical ruler who did much to construct an impressive welfare state. As I have argued, Awolowo was not only a future-making thinker, but he was also a practice-oriented future maker. As Premier of the Western Region and as Federal Finance Minister, he showed how historical and social analysis, social thought, research, deliberation, debate, and bringing together of highly skilled, public-spirited men and women of goodwill, in addition to an organizational insight and foresight, can help to leverage a socio-economic and political project and ensure its success. This is why the quality of governance in both thought and action in the Western region under his leadership remains unrivaled to this day. When he was acknowledged by the late Chief Odumegwu Ojukwu as the best president Nigeria never had, it was not a mere expression of admiration for the man. It was a testament to a state builder whose vision of a greater polity and accomplishments remained unparalleled in Nigeria's political history. Yet, we must acknowledge that Awolowo's signal error was to conceive of politics solely and unrelentingly as an instrument of social good. In fact, it was his near fatal error. It almost cost him his life, but it cost him his freedom for a few years. And it cost him federal electoral victories 4 times, while also costing him the permanent scorn of members of some elite formations and their heirs who were and still are either threatened by his egalitarian vision of a country where no one can be a slave to the circumstances of their birth. Even when he offered to repeat on a larger scale the benefits that his people in the Western region had gained under his administrative genius, they said no. So, what was his error in this? Awolowo assumed that once you showed the people the light, they will eventually follow it. He initially underestimated the odds that he faced at the national level, both political and cultural, and the infernal commitment of the rival elite formations to ensure that his form of egalitarian rule would never be practically federalized in Nigeria. However, while we are all focused on how to get Nigeria back on the path to a greater future and ensure good leadership, it's important to focus on the fundamentals of that hope. We don't just need good leaders. We have a few. Some of them are in this audience. Some are in the right places, some are in the wrong places. What we need is overall good leadership, one that is organized or produced by and supported by a healthy political system, that is through federalism, a constitutional democracy, a strong party system, an ideological and politically strong yet fundamentally egalitarian elite formation, and an educated and committed citizenry that both believe in and are convinced about the possibility of a greater future for the country, despite the current formidable odds. A strong and enlightened political agency is and must be the foundation of a collective imagination of a greater future. It is the business of the socio-political reformers, political thinkers, political leaders and state builders, such as Obafemi Awolowo showed, not only to raise fundamental questions about the state and society, and to think through the solutions by mobilizing the whole polity, but also to provide practical solutions to the challenges of social life today in order to create a greater society in the future. No one has taught this thought better and demonstrated the great impact such political thought could have on the future better than the man who beckoned on Nigeria in the UPN anthem. And I think it's better to hear him in his own voice.
That we owe to our great dear motherland, to enhance her and to boost her in the eyes of all the world. Egalitarianism is our national watchword. Equality of good fortune must be to each sure reward. Liberty and brotherhood are the goals for which we will strive, plus progress, plus plenty, and all the good things of life. Up, up, Nigeria, and take thy rightful place. It is thy birthright and thy destiny, Africa's leading light to be.
It is the task of our generation to heed the voice of wisdom, of courage, and of unity. Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, please grant me the indulgence to dedicate this lecture to that irrepressible party man who departed a little over a year ago. No one could have shown greater commitment to defending the Awolowo ethos and doing whatever was in his power, even in his last days on earth, to ensure that Nigeria moved, no matter how reluctantly so, towards Awo's vision for the country. I recall a few of us, his younger compatriots, sitting around him by his bedside a few months before his passing. Even in that retired physical state, the old man was still spitting fire at those who accused of compromising the nation's future. No one exemplified party spirit better than he did. You might disagree with him, you are likely to, but you could never fault his commitment to any settled party cause. As a party man, he was a political bulldozer, the metaphoric track-laying party tractor with caterpillar tracks and a broad-curved upright blade at the front for clearing political ground. I am, of course, speaking about no one than the departed lion of progressive politics, Chief Ayo Adebanjo. May his soul rest in peace. I thank you for your attention.
If you plan to clap, clap properly. Thank you. Let's have our seats, please. We have slot for 5 questions. And if we should make it open to say, raise your hands for questions, we'll have no less than 50. So, we have voted. Don't ask me who the we are. Because it is a democracy, we cannot just do what the Babangida government did and annul June 12th anyhow. We feel it will be good for us to segment. Consequently, 3 classes of people are going to be represented here today in our feedback segment. So, Professor Adebanwi, there are questions that are going to be coming. I will not answer them for you. Thank you very much. The first class will be Royal Fathers, and I think the best person that we have. There are a number of us here. Don't ask me how many. They don't represent you. So because we can't even vote, Are Gani Adams will represent royal, the traditional class of people in this hall today. We also reckon that because Chief Obafemi Awolowo was a politician of repute, and he was a foremost opposition party man. In fact, I say that because we don't have opposition politics being played by Chief Obafemi Awolowo, we don't have opposition party politics the way it used to be at that time. Please, if I say all in favor, say I don't answer me, because there is opposition politicians in this house. I want to still go home and sleep with my two eyes closed. The third class of people will be young people. Why? Because Ambassador Awolowo Dosunmu mentioned the other time a class of people between ages 20 and 35 at a special program is available for them. So if you are between ages 20 and 35, you will indicate that you have a question. Come forward, indicate that you have a question, and you will be recognized. I'm going to throw the first question. What's the title of the lecture you just listened to? I didn't hear any answer. I'm asking because some people know that they have a program, but they are not looking. So, because all I'm hearing is nursery rhyme, the way we are responding. So, politics as future making, Awolowo and leadership as theory of action. That is the title of the lecture that we've listened to. I'll take the mic now to Are Ona Kakanfo Gani Adams for his first comment or question as a representative of the traditional class here.
Let me stand on the existing protocol. I don't have question to ask my dear friend, erudite scholar. One of the book he wrote was saying a lot about me, and we were planning to launch that book last year, but we failed to launch it. I was not disappointed on his submission in this lecture. I thank the chairman and the board of trustees of Awolowo Foundation to find someone like Adibangui to give this lecture. Especially the content I love most in the question is the issue of true federalism. He has break the issue of true federalism to the extent that if we don't have federalism, true federalism in this country, there is no way we can move forward. And even from the chairman of occasion, our father, Chief Emeka Anyoku, from his submission in welcome address, he said something about true federalism. Without true federalism, we will continue not have a very good economy in this country. The issue of insecurity will persist in this country. And the issue of not having good governance will be a day story that we'll be telling ourselves. By and large, Professor Adibangui give us a details about the history and the book Chief Obafemi Awolowo have wrote. And he encourages us that we should try to get 5 books that is very, very important. that we should go through that book, especially the philosophy and the advice Chief Obafemi Awolowo gave to us to move this country. I think this is enough for us to take home as a guest in this gathering. So I will thank the foundation for sustaining this lecture, because we have a lot of great people in this country that we can call a martyr, that their children supposed to organize something like this. But because maybe they were not interested, a lot of people did not know what their father have done for this country. And I will thank our dear auntie, Ambassador Obafemi Awolowo, for his efforts to make sure that we that is coming, new generation, we continue to know more about Obafemi Awolowo. And one of the beneficiaries of free education, because I saw you that you are saying you are beneficiary. One of the beneficiaries of Awolowo free education. So, gentlemen in this gathering, we have to thank the Awolowo Foundation for bringing a very good resource person.
Thank you, sir. Please give him a proper round of applause. For politicians, I'd like to very quickly, please, because today is Friday and we know the Muslims, they have to go pray, we have to make this very, very fast. So each person that I call, you have just 1 minute to make your comment so that we can take some other important people. Prince Adebayo Adewale, the mic is yours where you are. Please give him a round of applause. 1 minute, sir.
Thank you. Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to observe all the protocols. You please deem them observed. The essence of coming here today is to remember the late Chief Obafemi Awolowo. And Chief Awolowo was a meticulous person. Almost every part of his life, from childhood to his demise, is well documented. And Chief Awolowo told us how to remember him. Chief Awolowo said, and I will paraphrase because I have a short time. He said, I would like to be remembered for helping to build a strong and united state. I would like to be remembered for helping to build a strong and united multi-ethnic state. I would like to be remembered for creating a basis for an irreversible revolution in education and in provision of social justice. I have not achieved this, but I have set a pattern which no other Nigerian can ignore. So the conclusion is that if you want to remember Chief Awolowo, you cannot go against a strong multi-ethnic state in Nigeria. You cannot be against education, and you cannot be against social justice.
Okay.
So it's left for all of us to remember that in governance, we are in an anti-Awolowo generation now, because the way in which we have run our system is against the principle set by Awolowo. Therefore, we must bring Afenifere back. We must return to Afenifere politics so that we can achieve the aim of Chief Awolowo. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There's a student that has a question, and then we'll call the governors and the deputy governors to the microphone. Quickly, your question.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. My own question is, Awolowo believed in federalism, that, okay, for Nigeria to progress economic-wise, we have to be together. Now, the practical situation of things now, the young people in this country are gradually going against that. Because, let me use the word, a lot of people are losing faith to Nigeria. Now, how do we rekindle that? Because for Nigeria to really progress, we have to really come together, everybody chipping in to progress. Now, how do we rekindle the fire or the belief back in the young people towards this true federalism?
Thank you very much. Please give him a round of applause, an intelligent one there. Well, Professor, please, just hold on. We're coming to you in a moment, but we need to take some remarks very, very quickly. I'll invite, first of all, the Deputy Governor of Ogun State to the microphone for her comments as we continue the program. Please give her a round of applause as she comes. Please, let's clear the front. Please, let's clear this front and let's clear the aisle, please. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, Your Royal Majesties, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to adopt the already well-established protocols. My name is Noimot Salako Oyedele, Deputy Governor of Ogun State, here representing the Governor of Ogun State, His Excellency Prince Dapo Abiodun CON. Here are His Excellency's remarks. This annual lecture provides an opportunity not only to remember one of Nigeria's most distinguished statesmen, but also to reflect on the enduring relevance of his ideas to governance and national development. It therefore gives me great pleasure to welcome everybody here to Ikenne in Ogun State for this very important gathering. I commend the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation under the leadership of Ambassador Olatokunbo Awolowo Dosunmu for sustaining the intellectual legacy of Chief Awolowo through lectures, publications, and public engagement that keep his ideas alive in our national conversation. We're honored to have listened to Professor Wale Adebanwi, an eminent scholar of African politics or society. His scholarship continues to deepen our understanding of leadership, governance, and democratic development. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, today's lecture reminds us that Chief Obafemi Awolowo viewed politics as a serious responsibility, a platform for designing policies that improve the lives of citizens and shape the future of society. For him, governance was fundamentally about human progress and the welfare of people. His belief that leadership must be guided by ideas, planning, and disciplined execution remains highly relevant today. For us in Ogun State, the legacy of Chief Awolowo carries a special meaning. He remains one of our most distinguished sons, and his example continues to guide our approach to governance and development. Our administration's development agenda, Building Our Future Together, draws inspiration from the progressive philosophy that leaders like Chief Awolowo championed. The idea that government must expand opportunities for citizens and invest deliberately in human development. In the area of education, we continue to prioritize school infrastructure, teacher development, and digital learning tools so that young people in Ogun State are equipped with the knowledge and skills needed for a rapidly changing world. So I was very happy to hear in Professor Adebanwi's comments about if Chief Awolowo had been with us today, he would have been an AI advocate. And I can assure you that we are keeping touch with the rapidly changing world. We are also investing significantly in infrastructure, particularly road construction and rehabilitation, to improve connectivity, support commerce, and strengthen Ogun State's position as Nigeria's leading industrial hub. Our administration is equally strengthening programs in healthcare, agriculture, youth empowerment, and social welfare, with the objective of ensuring that development reaches every community and every segment of society. These efforts reflect a simple conviction that the principles of progressive governance championed by Chief Awolowo remain relevant pathways for development in contemporary Nigeria. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the greatest tribute to the legacy of Chief Obafemi Awolowo is not merely remembrance, but the continued application of the values he represented: purposeful leadership, thoughtful policy design, and a commitment to improving the welfare of the people. As we reflect on his life and ideas today, may we all be inspired to strengthen our institutions, expand opportunities for our citizens, and continue building a society that serves both present and future generations. Once again, I thank Ambassador Tokunbo Awolowo Dosunmu and the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation for hosting this very important discourse, and I wish everyone happy deliberations. God bless you all.
Thank you, madam. Up next, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome comments from His Excellency, the Governor of Oyo State, Engineer Seyi Makinde.
Well, Your Excellencies, our royal fathers, our leaders and elders from across the country, distinguished ladies and gentlemen,
just a quick interregnum, ladies and gentlemen. Sincere apologies, Your Excellency. Please continue, sir. Your Excellency, please continue.
Well, let me also congratulate the chairman of Obafemi Awolowo Foundation, and also the chairman of the 2026 lecture. Well, I also have an anecdote, personal one, with the University of Pennsylvania. Yours was 60 years ago. I was 16 years ago. And my first daughter, she was then at, I think, the freshman in high school, just about 160 miles outside of Philadelphia. So she said to me that, look, I will attend University of Pennsylvania. And I said, well, fine. Anyway, 4 years later, she was at Wharton Business School, and she graduated in, I think, 2019. So that's the end of my own personal anecdote. No, that's 60 years ago, and nothing personal. It was well, there are just about 2 or 3 things that I need to take away from the lecture. And let me thank you, Professor Adebanwi. I've collected your contacts, and I will be talking to you, because this lecture and the analysis couldn't have been couldn't have come at a better time. It's very apt. This is a period leading to the 2027 elections. Two things came out. We're talking about federalism. That is what Chief Awolowo stood for, and you quoted copiously out there. Multi-party democracy. Allow ideas to flow. But I can say that me, as a governor of a state in Nigeria, I've been asking, please give me the Electoral Act signed by Mr. President so that we will know which hymn book we're singing from. I haven't seen it. That is the reality. I haven't seen it. If you have it, well, there's a senator of the Federal Republic here. If you have it, please, I would like to have it. Also, federalism. I'll just give two examples. Papa, we're talking about history. I would say Papa Awolowo stood for this. But there are two countries in Africa that they've passed through very difficult situation, perhaps more difficult than Nigeria. I've been talking to our past military leaders, and I asked them, you've been in Eastern DRC. And they said, yes, we served in Eastern DRC, part of United Nations contingent. One of them said, yes, I was there 1960. The other one said, I was there 1961. Okay, let's fast forward. 1960 to 2026, that's 66 years ago. And last December, they were there for peacekeeping. Rebels overran Eastern DRC after they killed Patrice Lumumba. Now, December of last year, I was watching on TV the president of Rwanda and the president of DRC. They were signing peace agreement because rebels have not stopped operating in Eastern DRC. This is 65 years. If we don't do something about our situation, 100 years from now, we'll still be in the same situation because we've seen it happen somewhere. But fast forward also, Rwanda, they faced genocide. Millions were killed. 1994. But if I ask anybody in this room today, if you are likely going to transit through a country to go to Asia, which country will it be? Very likely Rwanda. Because they took up the challenge, they fixed their country, and now everybody wants to go right there. Yes, I agree, true federalism is the way to go, but you need elite consensus. Yes, we all need to come together. We should stop thinking about the next election. Let us think about the next generation. Thank you and God bless you.
Senator OGD, the mic is yours for a brief comment of just 1 minute. But I understand there is a presentation for His Excellency, the Governor of Oyo State. All right. Your Excellency.
Our chairman, Honorable Minister, standing in for Mr. President, other excellencies, the time is fast spent. I will therefore be very, very short. It is both an honor and a personal privilege to share this moment with you at this memorial lecture series. We must remember that to visit an argument about politics, an argument captured beautifully in the theme of this lecture, politics as future making, Awolowo, and leadership as theory of action. To speak of Baba Awolowo is to speak of a peculiar mind, one that refused to treat politics as improvisation or leadership as a performance for applause. He saw politics as disciplined action rooted in ideas, animated by moral conviction, and directed towards a future that didn't yet exist, but could be built through vision and commitment. Let me quickly thank the lecturer today, Professor Wale Adebanwi. I am aware that you have been part and parcel of this struggle in the last 20 years. And both you and your brother have done beautifully well. Thank you very, very much. In an area when politics has become reduced to spectacle, today's team invites us back to substance. Awolowo approached governance as a serious intellectual enterprise. His landmark work, which was already referred to Path to Nigerian Freedom, was not a manifesto of anger or frustration, but a carefully reasoned meditation on federalism, on justice, and the institutional design most befitting a multicultural post-colonial state like Nigeria. He was convinced that political freedom without structural clarity will collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. For him, the future could not be organized if it wasn't first imagined with a great sense of responsibility. He understood quite early that leadership must think in decades, not just in election circles. That is why, as Premier of the Old Western Region, he succeeded in translating theory into action through various things that have been well documented. The architecture of a building toward society deserves of catching up with the developing ones. TV establishment. He democratized socialism as not just a doctrinaire. Rather, it was pragmatically shaped by the realities of a plural society and the urgency of post-colonial reconstruction. Early initiative embodied the notion that citizens have the ability to flourish when the state invests in their capacities through planning. And for such a towering intellectual and political figure, therefore, it would be a disservice to canonize him without engaging in deep reflection. Awolowo operated a complex environment alongside formidable contemporaries with whom he disagreed at different times, and sometimes sharply too, about the pace and pattern of national progress. The debates, far from being tribal rivalries, were competing visions of Nigeria's future. In revisiting Awolowo today, we have been invited once again to revive the quality of those debates, rigorous, principled, and anchored in ideas, not just cultural identities. From our reflections, I'm persuaded that a theory of action asks at least three important questions. What kind of society do we seek? What principles to guide us? And lastly, and but the least important, what concrete steps will move us from here to there? Awolowo did not operate these questions. He connected moral imagination with administrative competence. He also appreciated that public office demands intellectual preparation. He read widely, wrote meticulously, and treated policy as an extension of philosophy. Nigeria today faces challenges that test our collective imagination, economic volatility, demographic pressure, technological distortion, and the affinities of national cohesion. These are not problems that can be solved by mere slogans. They require, across different levels, a brand leadership that sees beyond the immediate and acts with disciplined foresight. In this sense, this memorial lecture is not just about nostalgia. It is first and foremost a rebuke to the political class, which over the decades have lost its ways, and yet an inspiration that reveals that renewal is still possible if we elect to be intentional. So, as we reflect today, I can only urge our younger ones and emerging leaders to engage Awolowo not as an icon beyond critique, but as a thinker in conversation with us. Read him, argue with him, stretch the ideas. Every generation must reinterpret his inheritance within the context of his peculiar experiences while retaining and guiding his enduring values. The worst tribute we can pay our esteemed statesman is to freeze his vision in marble. No. The best tribute we can pay, however, is to continue to demand study, reflection, and have ethical clarity. Let us call our love back to the discipline of policy rooted in philosophy. Let me end by once again commending the organizers of this flagship gathering, Ambassador Tokunbo Awolowo Dosumo. Over the years, you have remained consistently consistent despite all odds. We thank you. We appreciate you. May this gathering rekindle us in the conviction that politics at its best is an act of collective imagination, that leadership is accountable not only to the present electorate but to future generations, and that the measure of our public life will not be in the noise we generate, but the institutions we build and the opportunities that we secure for the yet unborn. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the microphone the Minister of State for Health and representative of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria at this event, Dr. Isiaq Salako. Your hand clap is not enough. Oh.
Thank you very much. The day is fast spent, so I'm not going to do a very long protocol, but permit me to mention 3 or 4 people specifically. First, to recognize the chairman of today's event, our leader, an icon, Chief Emeka Anyeoku, GCON, and also the chairman of the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation, the OB of Onitsha. Kabiyesi, Your Royal Majesties, let me also specially recognize the executive director of the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation, Ambassador Dr. Mrs. Olatokunbo Awolowo Dosunmu, and of course, the senator representing this senatorial district. If Chief Awolowo were alive, he would be senator, and my former boss, former governor of Ogun State, Otumba Gbenga Daniel. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols duly extended. I must also specially recognize our guest lecturer, Professor Wale Adebamwi. Thank you for a very good lecture and for reflecting the future-making philosophy of Chief Obafemi Awolowo. I bring warm greetings from the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, as we today once again celebrate the life and times of a pioneering Nigerian nationalist, a federalist, a revered statesman who has been described fittingly as the best president Nigeria never had, Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Pa Obafemi Awolowo is remembered for his exceptional integrity, intellectualism, and implementation of welfare-oriented and human capital development policies, which leapfrogged the Western region to the front row of our country's socio-economic development, and up to today, continues to shape the trajectory of the Southwest region. There are many great Nigerians, living and dead, who have been qualified and described in many complimentary ways. To my knowledge, nobody else has been so widely referred to as a sage like Pa Awolowo, qualifying him as a profoundly wise man with deep experience and sound judgment. He is, and I use present tense deliberately, in the class of old legends like Confucius, Buddha, Socrates, and modern ones like Nelson Mandela, Warren Buffett, etc. On behalf of Mr. President, I wish to congratulate the Board of Trustees, the Executive Director, Ambassador Dr. Olatokunbo Awolowo Dosunmu, and all members of the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation for keeping the intellectual can-do associated with Pa Awolowo burning since 1992. I was not around in this world between 1954 and 1959 when Pa Awolowo served as the Premier of the Western region of Nigeria. But the records are there of how Western region became a pride of Nigeria and a global reference point through its transformative agenda anchored on welfareism, human capital development, and infrastructural revolution. But I was around between 1979 and 1983 when Pa Awolowo led the Unity Party of Nigeria that produced 5 governors in the Southwest and Midwest of Nigeria to implement the 4 cardinal welfareist program of free education at all levels, free healthcare services, integrated rural development, and full employment. These 5 state governments, up until today, remain a benchmark of measuring successive government within and outside the Southwest. History taught us that when Chief Obafemi Awolowo introduced the revolutionary Universal Basic Education Program to the Western region in 1955, it was misunderstood and heavily resisted by the British colonialists, opposition politicians, and parents who wanted their children to work on farms. But he acted firmly and courageously and was quoted to have declared that any parent who stops a child from going to school will be arrested. Chief Awolowo predicted correctly and perfectly when he said, and I quote, "You may hate me today, but tomorrow you will thank me." Today, the Southwest region of our country continues to leverage on that solid foundation of human capital development laid by its policies and programs, for which every Yoruba man, including myself, remains ever grateful. As Premier, Chief Obafemi Awolowo also prioritized infrastructural development, especially building roads. Record has it that he revolutionized road infrastructure by constructing over 2,000 kilometers of roads, including significant bitumen surface roads, which was nearly 10 times the mileage inherited from the British colonial administration. Chief Obafemi Awolowo demonstrated that to go beyond cosmetic impacts and profoundly change the trajectory of our development, we need leaders who are courageous, who are focused, who are visionary, who think not just of the immediate, but of the future. Leaders who act, not just talk. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I wish to submit that Nigeria has a leader in the mold of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, currently leading the country. The reforms that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, introduced on the assumption of office are those of a man with clear vision, courage, and tenacity to follow through. Those reforms literally pulled Nigeria from the precipice of bankruptcy and physical collapse. Successive governments before May 2023 avoided addressing challenges head-on and chose to provide palliative treatment to an ailment that required radical surgery. Today, the socio-economic indices are clearly showing that Nigeria is recovering from the inevitable radical economic surgery applied by Mr. President. With a GDP of 4.23% growth in Q2 of 2025, fastest in 4 years, reduced inflation as at August 2025, strengthened and stable Naira, significant decrease in debt servicing to revenue ratio, consistent trade surplus, increasing foreign reserves, which is the highest in 13 years, and foreign portfolio inflow, Nigeria, in the words of Mr. President, has turned the corner. On the social front, food inflation is easing, and petrol prices are also reducing. Prior to the Middle East, hold on. Prior to the Middle East issues, the petrol prices were on the downward trend. Similar to Chief Obafemi Awolowo, President Tinubu, President to Chief Obafemi Awolowo, President Tinubu is also implementing several legacy road infrastructural projects designed to integrate Nigeria's 6 geopolitical zones and drive economic growth. Key initiatives include the 750-kilometer Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway, the 1,608-kilometer Sokoto-Badagry Superhighway, 465 Trans-Sahara Highway, and the Akwanga-Jos-Bauchi-Gombe Road, 350-kilometer Abuja-Zaria Expressway, and of course here in Ogun State, we are seeing the Shagamu-Ijebu-Ode-Ore Benin Expressway being done. In the health sector, far-reaching sector-wide reforms introduced through the Health Sector Renewal Investment Initiative are bringing forth significant improvement in our national health indicators. Maternal mortality is going down by up to 17% in some high-burden local governments. So also is infant mortality rate. Our PHC revitalization project has delivered about 4,000 level 2 PHCs in partnership with state governments. Over 98 billion was disbursed in 2025 through the Basic Healthcare Provision Fund to strengthen primary healthcare delivery across Nigeria. Healthcare insurance coverage expanded from about 5% to over 11% under the current administration, representing more than 21.1 million Nigerians enrolled across various channels. We have also expanded public tertiary health facilities, especially in areas of oncology and nephrology, and also attracting private sector investment in high-end health facilities. We are addressing the challenges of high outbound medical tourism. And according to the Central Bank of Nigeria, spending on medical tourism has dropped by more than 52% since 2003 as a result of this effort. More than 7.2 million Nigerians are now registered on the National Health Information Exchange, and over 200 hospitals now operate with electronic medical record, some of them 100% digitized. We are unlocking the healthcare value chain and increasing our local capacity to produce active pharmaceutical ingredients, drugs, devices, and equipment. Our NAFDAC is one of the 4 national health product regulatory bodies in Africa that has WHO level 3 status. In the area of disease prevention, our immunization program has been expanded to include new vaccines, including HPV, malaria, combined measles and rubella, which are being delivered at pace and at scale to our children. Similar progress is being made in several other sectors. Excellencies, distinguished gentlemen, Nigeria under Bola Ahmed Tinubu-led government, with the support of the citizen, is on a clear path towards economic recovery and prosperity. Our goal to achieve a $1 trillion economy and build an egalitarian society is adding up. Some may misunderstand, or even abuse Mr. President for now. But like Chief Awolowo, many will thank him tomorrow. The World Bank and other multilateral development bodies project continued growth for Nigeria, but emphasize that reforms must be sustained for 10 to 15 years to unlock Nigeria's full potential. I would therefore like to call on all of us to sustain our faith in our country and the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. We need all hands to be on deck to sustain and consolidate these gains itemized in order to translate to better living conditions for the ordinary Nigerians. Bodies like the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation should continue to objectively analyze the policies of government and dispassionately inform the people of the progress being made towards the common good of all citizens. Once again, on behalf of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, I congratulate the Obafemi Awolowo Foundation for the event of today and for sustaining the legacy of intellectualism and robust discourse the late sage was known for. Let us continue to work together with the government for peace, stability, and progress of our country. And so, with peace and plenty, Nigeria shall be blessed. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Dr. Isaac Salako, representing the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It's time for us to say goodbyes, but before that, we are giving awards right now. What is going on to the right of the podium are awards being given to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ably represented. And next you have an award to the Senator of Chief Obafemi Awolowo's constituency, as well as the guest lecturer today. I can see that the matter of fuel subsidy is still a pepper as well. All right, I understand. Just before the chairman's closing thoughts, food is going to be served to fuel your tummy. There is no subsidy on the food. So please, sit down. it will come to you. Okay? Thank you. Apparently, none of us heard the parts where the representative of the president said, prior to the crisis in the Middle East, fuel prices were fairly stable. It has taught me something. Next time I'm writing speech, I'll put the cliffhanger at the end, because after that nobody heard anything that the representative of the president said anymore. Mr. Chairman, we need you here now before this broadcast is terminated on air. Please give us just a minute or two. This is the last award presentation to the guest lecturer today, Professor Wale Adebanwi. And after this, we'll have the chairman's closing thoughts, and we'll call it a day in a moment. Mr. Chairman, sir. Mr. Chairman, sir, the mic is yours.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, well, ladies and gentlemen, every good thing they say has to have an end. And I would like to be even briefer this time in my closing remarks. My first comment is on the lecture that we've had the pleasure of listening to by Professor Wale Adebanwi. I must say that this is for me, this has been the most scholarly presentation of the linkage between Chief Obafemi Awolowo's writings and his actions, both as Premier of Western Region and the other political activities in which he was engaged. And I was extremely fascinated by the fact that the lecturer dedicated the lecture to late Pa Ayo, because for almost 14 years I worked in the selection committee with very prominent Awos, many of whom have now departed. I worked with Olaniwo Ajayi, with Professor Mababunje and Professor Akinkube, and of course with Ayo Adebanjo. And I learned a lot about Obafemi Awolowo from them during these years. So I'm delighted, and I would like to thank Professor Wale Adebanwi for dedicating the lecture to Chief Ayo Adebanjo. There will be a vote of thanks. So it's not for me to thank you, but I must mention especially my personal thanks and the thanks of all the members of the selection committee and the technical committee which works with the selection committee, to Ambassador Dr. Tokunbo Awolowo, because she's the moving spirit behind all that happens in the name of the Awolowo Foundation, and she's tireless in performing the responsibilities that she's assumed for herself. So I say a special thank you to her, and I would also like to say a special thank you to our MC. But as I said, it's not my task to move a vote of thanks, so I will stop at this point. And thank you all for being here. Thank you, sir.
Well, again, the chairman has declared that the vote of thanks should be next. Therefore, I invite to the microphone the fellow for the vote of thanks. Can I ask, please, the food cannot be talking. Hello, gentleman and lady who is handling the food. There should be the food is not talking. The food will get to you. Let's all be quiet, please. Thank you. Let everyone just sit. Just sit, please. There's a lot more to go around. Please welcome for the vote of thanks, Professor Oyebanji Oyelanroye-Yinka. A round of applause for him, please, as he comes.
Well, I think the day is far gone. I'm here to give a short vote of thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, our honored colleagues, distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Wale Adebambi. At the conclusion of the most inspiring lecture on leadership, it is both for me a privilege and a profound honor to extend our heartfelt vote of thanks. Today, we celebrate the legacy of Papa Awolowo, a monumental figure in Nigerian politics, whose contributions have indelibly shaped the lives of millions of people. Papa's impact has been undeniably transgenerational. As we have heard, Papa fits the description of Karl Marx, who once observed that men make their own history, but they do not make it just as they please. They do not make it under circumstances chosen by themselves, but under circumstances directly found, given, and transmitted from the past. Papa made history. He shaped the trajectory of generation. He was a future builder. and a future maker, as our keynote speaker said. Therefore, first and foremost, I want to thank the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, our President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, ably represented by the Minister, Dr. Ishaq Salako. We are very grateful for your presence. I would like to express our deepest gratitude to our distinguished speaker, Professor Adebambi. Your insights into the principles and practices of effective leadership and the impact of papas have not only enlightened us, but have also reignited our commitment to embodying these values in our own lives. There's no one who has heard your eloquence today who wouldn't know that you have been on this subject matter for a long time. Thank you very, very much. To our esteemed elders, governors, present and past, traditional rulers, clergy, patrons, political leaders, thank you for your esteemed presence and sharing your perspectives, experiences, formal and informal. I want to thank my state governor, GSM, who has now left, Seyi Makinde, for personally attending this event. All of you, your diverse insights have enriched our understanding of leadership in a very complex world, have heightened the importance of resilience, empathy, and vision. We are in a tumultuous world, and we will do well to read these books recommended by our speaker. A special acknowledgement goes to the Selection and Technical Committee. I'm a member of the Technical Committee, and I thank my colleagues here and the Selection Committee of the Obafemi Awolowo Prize for Leadership. I salute our chairman, 93-year-old patron, Chief Emeka Anyaku, and other elders on the committee. Your tireless efforts in bringing together this gathering of minds and hearts have made this occasion not just possible, but memorable. Your meticulous planning and dedication over the years have ensured that we continue to honor Papa in the most fitting manner. To all who support, to all who partner, we are grateful for your generous support. Your commitment to fostering leadership in Nigeria is applauded. Lastly, to all of you in the audience and all of you who are talking and shouting, I salute you also. Your presence signifies a collective commitment to honor Papa Awolowo. And I commend our MC, Ayo Makinde, for a wonderful job. I think we should give him a very big applaud. Ayo is a consummate professional whom I like very much. As we have gathered to reflect, let us reflect on the lessons learned today on Papa's legacy. May we continue to inspire and uplift those around us, embodying the spirit of leadership that drives meaningful change. Thank you to all of you for participating, honoring a true giant of our nation. May God bless the Awolowo Foundation. May God bless our dear country, Nigeria. God bless you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, those who are serving food, please pause. Let's all rise for the national anthem. Please pause serving. Pause. Let's all rise and respect our nation. Let's be quiet, please. And as we all sing the national anthem.
Justice reign, in peace all battle honored, and this we count as gain. To hang unto our children a banner without stain.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.